Did you get one?
Okay, Aaron?
What was it?
All right, we're recording. So, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome to everyone. Welcome back to those who were here last week, and welcome for the first time to those who are joining us for the first time this week. Last week we talked about different ways in which we can pray, different kinds of prayer, different ways in which we have a frame of mind, different frames of mind that we have when we pray. Rabbi Mark Gelman, we saw in his New York Times interview, put it very simply this way. These are four different kinds of prayer. Gimme, thanks, oops, and wow. Gimme is more traditionally referred to as a request. And we'll come across many requests in our prayers. Thanks, of course, doesn't need much explanation. Many of our classical prayers and prayers from the heart are prayers of thanksgiving. Oops, a prayer of slicha, asking for forgiveness. And wow, expressing wonder at the wonders of nature, like if you see the Grand Canyon or some other wonder of nature. That's a wow. And we're going to see different examples of these prayers as we go along. What I'd like to start with today is seeing the classical Jewish conception of prayer as service of God. And what we're going to do is, I want to write a Hebrew word on the board here, and we're going to see a certain recurrence of this word as we go through our studies today. All right? There's the Hebrew word root, word eved. Okay, I'll write it in the square Hebrew letters. Okay, if you have studied even a little bit of Hebrew, there are root words that can be made into all kinds of different forms, and eved is often translated as work or service. And I want to do a little survey of this word in biblical literature and see how it has evolved, and then we'll see how it's used in a particular text of rabbinic literature. So if you look on your sheets that I just handed out today, everything is translated, but I included the Hebrew deliberately so that you could at least see the different forms of the word eved. All right, in last week's Torah reading, we began reading the book of Exodus, the book of Shemot, just last week. And this is then the very first chapter of Exodus. The Egyptians made the people of Israel serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard slavery in mortar and in brick and in all kinds of service in the field. All their service which they made them serve was with rigor. And you can see in the underlined words have some form of this root, ayin bet dalet. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in that one sentence. This is a word that may sound familiar from the Passover Haggadah. Avadim ayinu. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. So avodah or eved, service or slave, this is the connotation of that root in this particular context, in the beginning chapters of the book of Exodus. Let's look a little bit further in the book of Exodus. Towards the end of Exodus, people are out of Egypt at this point. By the time we get to Exodus chapter 30, they're out of Egypt. They've received the Decalogue at Mount Sinai, and now they are beginning to build the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary that was to be a prototype for the ultimate temple in Jerusalem. And it's interesting to see how the word avodah comes out here. The text in English, and you shall take the atonement money of the people of Israel and shall appoint it for the service of the tent of meeting, that it may be a memorial to the people of Israel before the Lord, to make an atonement for your souls. Now, if you look at the English closely, there is the word service, and that corresponds to the underlined word in Hebrew, avodat ohel moed, the service of the tent of meeting. And does this mean that the people were to put on their slave clothes again and act as slaves inside the temple? But what does this mean here? What does it mean to use this word avodah?
Well, I think that one, your service to God, I mean, I think your connection to God is what I would interpret
Okay,
that.
so we're not slaves to Pharaoh, we're not slaves to any other human being, or servants to any other human being. The only being to whom we give service ultimately is God. And in creating the tent of meeting, even in this book of Exodus, where we see avodah or avadim so many times in connection to this bitter slavery to Pharaoh, here we see a different context. It is service to God.
It's a change in a way, because you're talking about avodah or eved. We used to be slaves, and that word actually changed and transformed, just like you just mentioned, from Egypt to we come to be what we know today as a laborer. What we do as a laborer, what we do for everyday living, that's become to be really the beginning of what it is to become everyday chores that you do, and you call it, instead of eved, you become to be avodah, which is labor, everyday labor. And this is just the beginning of it, maybe, to establish that this is actually a word that goes all the way from biblical time all the way to today in Israel, and that's what we use it, because our word is being used like on a daily basis.
Right, so no longer do we see avodah as slavery imposed upon us, but it's something that we do, in effect, in this case, perhaps to elevate us to a higher state of purpose.
And there's a reward for this. There's a reward for doing whatever we're doing, whatever is in the temple or whatever it's on a daily things. And okay, he was.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's turned a negative into a positive. And I was thinking the phrase, a labor of love, which.
Right, like you're not supposed to really, when you do
Good
things for
phrase.
people,
Right.
I mean, the real way to do it is not because you want to receive something back for yourself. I think that's the whole thing too.